Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another action-packed, handsome episode of your favorite rambling madmen podcast, Made Man, where today I just finished watching episode 4 of season 5, Signal 30. And as I finished the episode, I said to myself, what the hell does Signal 30 mean? What was that? Did I miss it? What does it is Signal 30 like a known saying? Is it something that I missed out on? I am not sure, but well, we get story from some characters that we don't get to see all that much. Our episode opens in a driver's education course. I remember those days of driver's ed. I don't remember ever seeing like in one of those scary films where they make you like watch and scare you straight. But anyway, it's a driver's ed course, and it's mostly for teenagers, and also for Mr. Creepy himself, Peter Campbell, who, because they now live in the suburbs, needs to get a license and learn how to drive an automobile. I wonder, this episode has a lot of Pete in it. I wonder, should I just stay with the Pete information? Stay with the Pete story? And it's kind of hard to just do that, so we'll just kind of take you through the Pete driver's ed stuff. And I think it is related to just Pete in general. He is not. Do you remember that scene from like seasons ago where he's just sitting there holding that gun in his office? It was at that moment where I called him a sociopath and a crazy person, and he is. It's almost like he's trying to be something. Every time he talks to people, he's like, hello there, well, how are you doing? And all these things, and hey, Don, welcome. It's almost like he's trying to do or be something that, like, well, this is how it's supposed to be, so this is how I'm going to be. And it comes off phony because I think it is phony. So Pete's in a driver's ed class, and I thought it was, for adults, as he was checking out this young woman in front of him. But we go to another class later on, and we find out, it's late. We find out it's not a young woman, it is a girl. It is a high school girl, a recent high school graduate. So we're talking 17, 18 at most. And Pete is like doing his Pete thing, like where he talks to you and he makes you feel very nice and he talks to you like this and it's very wonderful and he blah 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 blah, and this is how I also banged my neighbor's nanny, by talking to her like this, helping her with the dress and then taking advantage of her, and hopefully I'm going to take advantage of you, but it doesn't always work out that way for Pete. And I think Pete getting sad later in this episode had to do with the fact that he didn't get to have this conquest. But I feel like he still did in his mind. So this girl, was kind of flirty with him, actually, which, it's like she sees this older guy paying attention to her, and she's being, the yawns, the difficult, terrible yawns. She is being flirty back to him, but she is a child, Peter Campbell. A child. And he is like, we should go into the city together. He's talking about like, she'd love to go to the city. He's out of the city, just like normal, like talk at first, but like a little, then it got a little flirtier and you could see, he's a creep. So she doesn't know that, but we're well aware of Peter's creep factor. He, talks about we should go do something. And then in another class, he's like, we still have that, have to take that drive. And she gives him this like flirty little like smile, like, ooh, this would be nice. Never asks, hey, aren't you married or any of these creepy things, or aren't you just an old dude? And then a boy comes into the class. He's there a little late. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. And he goes up to Pete to give. I'm really apologize about the yawning, but you get what you pay for, obviously. He goes up to Pete to give him this information, and the girl's like, oh, no, he's not the teacher. That's Peter. And the guy's like, oh, sorry. And I think at that point, Pete's like, oh, people look at me like I'm old now? All of a sudden I'm old? And I get that. I recently turned 40, but that was over 3 years ago. I recently turned 43. And, where I work with a lot of people who are younger than me. And when I'm hanging out with them, like talking to them, and it's just like, there's no difference, but I am older. So it's like, you wonder, like, do they see you as this old guy? Like, I have friends who have kids who are close to, like, a couple years off of some of the people that I've worked with. And so, and they see me as, they see me as their parents' friends, but do they see me like a different generation? And yet I am a different generation from some of my coworkers, but I don't feel that way. You just feel like colleagues. You feel like you're working with them, and everything feels normal. And then you realize, you're 15 years or so older than them. But then I guess when there are people that are 15 years or so older than me, I don't look at them as much older. So maybe they don't see me as old. Maybe I'm not old. Maybe I'm young at heart. And that's what Pete thought. Pete thought I'm just a young guy. Let's tie this back into Mad Men. I'm just saying, get this off of me. Depressing. I'm just this young guy who, I got a family at home, but I'm still this young, cool dude who has lots of money. And, excuse me. And this girl was very taken by him until a handsome, muscular young lad came and basically started flirting with her. And by the end of the episode, they're in a class, and this kid's got his hand up her skirt, and Pete's just looking on like, I'm not going to get you. And we'll get there with Pete more. I don't think Signal 30 has anything to do with this stuff, right? I don't think so. So while this is going on, we also have a story with Lane. Lane has, he's got his wife back in the United States, but one of the things that she is happy about is that she's made some friends, some British friends, and they're into watching football. It's soccer for, us Americans, and there's going to be a big soccer match. Come on, Lane, we have to get ready for the soccer match. And he's like, I don't want to go. And my Lane is awful. I don't, these are your friends, and I don't even care about the soccer match. And the guy's like, the wife is like, can you at least pretend to go? He's like, fine, I shall pretend for you. And then they show him at this Irish-looking themed pub, and he's cheering and watching the game, and with another couple. And then they're talking afterwards, and the guy's like, aren't you an account man over at that that firm? And he goes, well, I'm more a financier. He goes, well, I'd love to talk to an account man. He goes, well, my name is on the door. This guy works for Jaguar, which I love in the commercials. They say Jaguar. And he kind of basically made reference to the fact that they're looking for a new firm. So later on in the episode, they go to a partners meeting, and Don, do you have any new business? Nope. Roger, do you have any new business? Nope. Pete? Nope. Cooper? Nope. And then Lane is like, actually, I have a new bit of business. And he's talking about this guy, and he brings it up. And Pete's like, oh, this is great. New business, cool. This is good news. We should set up lunches with them. And he's like, actually, gentlemen, I believe that I should, take this on my own and should, basically Lane wants to run with this because it's a British guy. He thinks he can relate to him more. He thinks he can get to him more. And so they're like, all right, fine, you can do it. And, there's a great scene with John Slattery with, oh my God, Roger Sterling talking to Lane and giving him advice about you want to do this, you want to do that, how to kind of socially manipulate the client into giving answers that he has questions for, so that you have the answers to give back to him, so that you can kind of satisfy everything that the guy wants. And it was actually a really cool moment. And John Slattery had some really great little moments in this episode. And he also directed it. I looked it up. He directed it, which I thought was really cool. So Lane takes this guy to to dinner, and it's pretty much a very staunchy, boring dinner. And Lane's trying to do the things that Roger offered to him. He's trying to find something that maybe he has a complaint about so he can relate. And the guy's like, honestly, Roger, honestly, Lane, I haven't a complaint in the world. And, everything's perfect. He loves his wife. He loves everything. And everything's perfect. And they, Lane didn't really get the signing. He didn't get to do with it. So the next day, Roger and Pete are talking to him. He's like, actually, I didn't go as I planned, but I have another plan. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this differently. And Pete and Roger are like, or it's more Pete. He's like, we're going to take it from here. We're going to take him out for dinner. We're going to do this. What we'll do is we'll set them all up, and then you can come and knock the pins down. Why would you take a swing from the tee when you can take a swing right from the green? Basically, we'll do all the hard work, then you can come in and do your British magic and make everything, you can have your bonding over countrymen. And I think Lane felt that was a little undermining. He didn't like it, but he accepted it. And, Pete kind of looks down on Lane. He definitely looks down on Lane, as you'll find out later in the episode. And he basically, when we close the door, he's like, Lane couldn't even close a refrigerator door or something like that. Something along the lines of, this guy isn't here to close things, and we're going to have to do this. So later on in the episode, Pete, you know what? This is where I'm going to back up before we get there. I'm going to back up a little bit and go back to some more Pete stories. So, Dawn, I haven't even really mentioned Dawn in this episode. But Dawn and Megan were, after a meeting, Dawn goes into the office, sees Megan, and Megan's like, we have to talk to Trudy about this party. He's like, what are you talking about? Trudy said, you're already going. Dawn's like, what are you talking about? And Pete brought it up in the meeting. He's like, I don't know if we can make it. And Pete's like, you can make it. I know you can make it. So Pete's throwing a dinner party at his house, and they do this. It was actually this cute little thing where Pete didn't take no for an answer. Says, Trudy said it's all set up. Trudy said that Dawn already said it's all set up to Megan, and Megan said, well, you said it's already set up. And Dawn's like, no, I didn't. And she called Trudy to try to back out of it, and she didn't take no for an answer. She's like, we'll just keep rescheduling. I know you don't have any plans. We can do this. It'll be great. And she was like, this will be wonderful. Thank you. And, Allison Bree's great. And Dawn was almost like, his head was spinning when he got off the phone. He's like, okay. So him and Megan are going to go to a dinner party. And Dawn, you could see he just wasn't looking forward to it. He's drinking. He's in a suit, like a work suit. Megan's like, you need to put a sports coat on, and you need to stop drinking. He's like, I want to be ready. I want to answer the door with my chin. In other words, he wants to go to that house and be so blitzed that he can't even just so he can't even think about it and doesn't have to worry about it and just gets through the thing. So we go to Pete's house in the suburbs, and I forget what he called it. It was like Cobb or something like that. I don't know what that is. I thought they were talking about Costco at one point. And Pete's there, and Ken Cosgrove is there with his wife. What's her name? They couldn't remember her name. It was very funny, actually, the way it came up. Ken. Oh, there's some Ken stuff we need to talk about too. We'll get there. So, at the dinner party, Ken and this is like I'm still awake. Don't worry. Ken and Pete are looking at Pete's cool, awesome stereo. Pete loves the fact that it's a big, giant piece of furniture. He loves that it's 7 foot tall, 7 foot long. Will Chamberlain can get inside it. And Ken's like, why would he want to do that? And it was just his way of bragging. Look what I have. Check this out. Look at this awesome stereo. It's like I feel like I'm opening up and there'd be a tiny symphony inside. And I'm wondering, is Signal 30 something to do with symphonies? I don't know. I'm not sure. I have one other guess, but I didn't hear it. So I don't want to. I like to try to figure these things out myself without looking it up. At least before I talk to you, and I can't grasp it. Signal 30 like a soccer thing? No, I don't think so. I mean a football thing. Sorry, everyone else in the world. So finally, the doorbell rings, and there's Dawn, and Dawn's in a sport coat now that looked so 60s. It's like, oh, these are like pictures that I remember when I was a little kid. Now, mind you, I was a little kid in the late 70s and the 80s. But I feel like still seeing pictures of my grandparents and still seeing my grandparents in very similar styles. Like that they didn't, this is like 10 years later, and they didn't grow out of it yet, 10, 15 years. With this tweed, like, plaid jacket and Megan, all done up. They're all, I don't know what I'm talking about, Megan being done up, but they show up all happy to be there, and everyone's kissing and hugging, and they still don't remember Ken's wife's name. So they have small talk, and this was the weird thing, where Pete was so excited to have Don there, and Don's like, what are you doing? He's like, you're actually here. This is crazy. And it was like, but it felt so phony. Like, it just looked like he's like, I'm happy. I'm a man. And also, Pete, you already see the hair starting to go. This was not a great episode for Peter Campbell. I'll just say that. He had some moments in the office where he was, you could see he's a take charge guy, but he had some not so great moments overall. So earlier in the episode, Pete came home from the driving class one night, and there was, he's in bed, and you could see in bed, he's just thinking about that girl. That's the way I took it. He's sitting there awake, thinking about that girl, and it's drip, 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 drip. And the kitchen sink is dripping, dripping, dripping. And Trudy's like, I don't even notice it anymore. Pete goes down, gets his tools, fuddles underneath it, and is all excited because he stopped the dripping. Well, later in the episode, they're having dinner, and when they go get dessert, all of a sudden, they hear the girls go, ah, and they're laughing and giggling, and they run out, and the sink has, like, exploded, and water's shooting out, and Pete's like, I'm going to go get my tool chest, and he runs off like a good little boy trying to please everybody and be the perfect guy. Don takes off his jacket, takes one screwdriver, goes on, puts a pan over the faucet to stop it, goes under, twiddle this, twiddle that, and boom, he fixes it. And Pete's like, well, what did you do? He goes, oh, there was too much pressure or whatever. It was filling the lines. Pete's like, well, it stopped the drip. He's like, but it was like a Band-Aid or something. It was temporary, basically. It could only hold so long. So Don came in and took Pete's, in Pete's house. He was the handyman to save the day. So I think that got to Pete as well. Now, what I didn't talk about is not Pete, but there is a third person in the story about. There's not a lot of Don, not a lot of Roger. They're like orbiting the story. They're in it here, they're in it there, but they aren't major parts of it. It was really Pete, Lane, and Ken Cosgrove. Or should I say Ben Cosgrove. So, at the beginning, early on in this episode, Peggy also, and Joan had a little more to do. Peggy just in a little bit in this episode. Here, there, just kind of peppered in, mostly with Ken. And I have a thought about that. So, Ken shows up at a diner where Peggy's eating, and Ken's like, oh, hey, how you doing? And he's with some older guy. And he's like, oh, that's Cynthia's uncle. He wants to get into radio. I'm trying to talk him out of it. She's like, oh, well, let me meet him. He goes, he's really shy. And you could see Peggy's like, okay, all right. She didn't believe him. She knew he was BSing her. And she thinks he is looking to find other work. And they always talk about, they have this pact where if he goes, he's taking her with her. And she says the same thing to him. So, Peggy's like, all right, cool. Later on in the episode, he goes into Peggy's office. She's like, oh, how did it go? I'm sorry I didn't get to meet your wife's uncle. And, she basically called him out knowing he was lying. She's like, what about the pact and all these things? He closes the door, locks the door, and says, listen, you know how I dabble in writing? This guy works for a publishing company. So does his wife, you find out. Did I say Trudy? Cynthia. Works for a publishing company, and they're trying to take some of his stories, 20 of his stories, and make a collection. And Peggy's like, 20? How do you have time to do this? He goes, I have a drink at dinner, or I'll have a drink instead of dinner. And by the time I get home, I'm just ready to go. And she was impressed by it. And he goes, don't worry, the pact still stands. If I leave, I'm taking you with me. She's like, okay, cool. Now, at the dinner table, it came up that he writes. And he kind of downplayed it. And I don't know how much Pete knew about it. But, Cynthia's like, this is how we actually met. I work for a publishing company, and they kept rejecting him. And I like some of the stories. And he talks about some of the stories. And there's this robot that works on a bridge. And then he takes a bolt out, and all these people die. And I was trying to figure out, is there something Signal 30 there? Is there something significant there where one thing, and Dawn actually showed a little interest in it, and Ken talked about it, like this thing doesn't know better, it just knows what to do, and it does it. I wonder if that's trying to say something about his work, and it's just like he just does his work, no matter what happens, he does his work. I don't know if there was a metaphor there. I was trying to figure that out. Now, we'll finish out Ken's story here. Ken, later on, Roger calls Ken into his office, and he says, listen, I heard that you're quite a writer. He goes, I think our job here does enough for you. Your job, your focus here, you have a day job and a night job already. If you do this job right, it should be everything you need. So Roger brings the hammer down on this guy, like, don't friggin' focus on writing creative stories. Focus on your job. And Ken was like, I understand completely. I get it. I understand. And he was, I think he was scared. He was obviously spooked about this. And he goes off to Peggy, and Peggy's like, how's it going with the thing? He goes, you know what? I'm not really going to do this, read the story right now. Because, I just got reamed by Roger. I know it was Pete that said something. She's like, how did he know? He goes, it came up at dinner the other night. Cynthia brought it up. I know it was him that said something about it. He goes, you know what? Ben Cosgrove is going to go away. I don't need to do work on the sci-fi stuff anymore. And maybe he said the pact still stands at that point too. I don't know. But Ken went away, and Peggy's like, oh, okay. I have a theory. They never said who spoke to Roger. They never, Ken assumes that it was Pete. You'd think it would be Pete. Pete was spending some time with Roger. Pete is spineless, is that a word? He's spineless like that. Like, he will go behind people's back. I mean, he went to Bert Cooper to talk about Dick Whitman. So it makes sense that it's Pete. But what if it was Peggy? What if Peggy said something to Roger? Just kind of innocently dropped a line. Almost as if she was bragging or being impressed or being positive. But what that did was get into Roger's head, and Roger then spoke to Ken about it. And it's funny, he goes, this one thing that Roger said was, this job could be everything you need, so I've been told. Or something like that, where it was, you could see that Roger is seeing, like the writing on the wall that, his days are numbered and he's not as important as he used to be. But what if it was Peggy? That was one of the thoughts that I had right then and there at that moment, especially when he says to Peggy, it had to be Pete. Why would they say that to us? Why would they have us think that? I don't know. I just felt like that was put there for a reason. But, Ken's a writer. He says, I'll leave writing to the writers. Well, you know what? He's a writer. Because as this episode was coming to an end, there was a voiceover, and it was Ken. And he's in bed with a notepad, and he's writing. And maybe he wasn't writing science fiction. He was writing something, though. He was writing basically influenced by Pete. I think it was about the guy who has everything but doesn't realize it and is blowing things. The man with the miniature... Well, you said the man with the miniature orchestra. And that's earlier in the episode, Pete was like, you could fit an orchestra in this stereo. Or it feels like I'm going to open this up and see a small orchestra. Ken was like, that is really interesting. And Ken took that and turned that into a short story with a different name. It was like, I forget what it was, but it was a completely different name. So, you can keep doing it. And really, when you're home on your own time, who's to stop you from doing that stuff? So good for Ken. I hope he just becomes a famous writer. And that's really the end of Ken's episode. And again, Don's episode pretty much ends, for the most part, with... No, it actually doesn't. I'm wrong. I'm very wrong. So after the dinner party, Megan and Don drive on the way home. Megan's driving. Don is drunk. Don basically seduces Megan to pull over and have car sex because she was turned on by him fixing, and he was just turned on in general, and she didn't want to do this while driving, so they just did it in the car. Get out of my dreams, get into my car. I didn't hit that one note, but that is a terrific Billy Ocean song. But that's it for as far as Don doing stuff. Like, Don's there later in the... No, I'm wrong again. I'm wrong. I was thinking about the ending with Lane and Pete, but no, there is more Don. Damn it. So, you remember Lane's guy. Man, we are going... I got lots to say in this episode. And I'm not done yet. Oh, only 28 minutes or so. Okay. Well, not too bad. Thank you for sticking with me. So that guy that, the British guy, the Jaguar guy, they want to get this guy. They want to get a car. So they bring him out for a big lobster. I'm from Boston. Big lobster dinner. So we got Don, this British dude, Pete, and Roger, all with their lobster bibs. And they're all eating and, talking about the Jaguar. And Don says something like, the Jaguar, you should be coming out of that smoking a cigarette or needing a cold shower. Basically, the Jaguar itself is like, seducing you. It's like sex. It's like, it's its own thing. And the guy's like, yes, very good. And the guy, he goes, listen, gentlemen, I'm not going to lie to you. You pretty much, it's inevitable you're going to have my business. You know that. But I thought maybe you'd show me a good time. And Pete's like, well, we could go to this other restaurant. He goes, I live in the city, Mr. Campbell. So, he knows that this isn't really that good of a time. And Roger's like, I have a friend who's having a party around the corner. We can go there. The guy's like, all right, that sounds like fun. Now, I didn't realize at the time that was a code. Signal 30. Is that like something to do with brothels? Because that's where they went. I need to look up what a Signal 30 is. Maybe it is something, and it happened in this episode. I just wish I wish I knew. But yeah, Roger's idea of a party is bringing everybody to a whorehouse, a brothel, a prostitution institution. I just made that up. And right away we see this British fella flirting with this girl, drinking, laughing, and I thought it was just a party at first. Then we see this young blonde chippy, with her hands all over Pete, And then I see a girl show up and talk to Roger, and then you realize there's a bar there, and it's all starting to come together. And Dawn is at the bar having a drink. You see the British guy go off, and he's like, "Yay, I'm going to go have sex with a hooker." And then Pete gets seduced by this blonde girl. She's like, "Do you think you could pick me up?" "Yes, you could. You have big muscles." Hee hee hee. And Pete is like, he's probably thinking about that girl from the driver's ed class because he's a creep. And this prostitute was a young blonde girl also, a little older, obviously, but they go off and do their thing. And then a girl comes over to Roger, and Roger goes off and does his thing. Roger left his wife for a younger woman, has a new wife, and is still, he impregnated Joan, and now he's with the whores. He is prostitutes, whatever. What do you want me to say? But Roger is miserable. Remember that word. Now, Dawn just hung out at the bar, and this older woman comes by and says, hello, hello, can you say hello to Officer Smith for me, or whatever? And Dawn's like, "I'm not a cop." She goes, "Oh, okay, well, there's another place down the street where you could meet another person." "Oh, do you want to find someone here you could meet with?" He's like, "No." He goes, "Well, I have a place down the street, and there's a guy you can meet." Basically saying, look, if you're not a cop, you don't want women, you obviously want a man. Don's like, "Nope, I don't want that." He goes, I grew up in these places. I know how these are." And she's like, "Oh, you never grew up in a place like that." He goes, "Oh," "I thought this was a whorehouse. We called it a whorehouse." She goes, "Oh, I see. Should we put a TV in here?" He's like, "No." And she goes, "Drinks on me." It was like almost like she saw that this guy knew, wasn't a bullshitter and just wasn't interested in doing anything. So later on, and that was really in the brothel. But later on, we see the three of them. Roger, did his own thing, or was already gone. In the back of a cab, the British guy goes off to his house. He's like, "Thank you for a wonderful night." And then it's just Pete and Dawn. And Pete was all mad because Dawn didn't partake. Pete and Pete was like, "You're going to judge me. This is you, Don Draper, not doing anything. I didn't think I was in the car with a nun." And Pete's like, Don's like, "You have it good. You have something good, and you don't need to do these things." And Pete's like, "This is coming from you, Rich, coming from the guy with the second wife." He's like, "Yeah, and if I had Megan the first time, maybe I wouldn't have screwed it up, And that stuck with Pete a little bit. When Pete was in the room with the hooker, the prostitute, the call girl, the I don't know what you want to call her. She took off her clothes. She's in her underwear. She gets on the bed, and she's like, she basically she says something like, I'm ready to go. And Pete goes, "Nope." And then the girl says, she like switches up. She's like, "Okay, I can." He says, "Are you any good at this?" She switches up, and she's like, I'm really nervous. This is my first time," which was very creepy. I really thought that was the one Pete was going to go with, because I thought that was the one that made him feel like he was with the student. He goes, "Nope." And then she's like, "You're my king." And that's when Pete says, "That'll work." And he goes over and he has intercourse with this prostitute. I think that was Pete's, desire to be the king. He wants to be the king of his family. He wants to be the king of his castle. Don came in and fixed stuff. He wants to be the king at work. And he's not quite there yet. And he was taken down a peg. And I think this girl just made him feel good. And he was pissed that Don didn't want to partake in it. But I like this new Don Draper. Introspective. Respectful to his wife. Actually happy. And I hope it stays. I hope it sticks. I really do. As much as you want to see a TV character, Roger had some great moments in this episode, but Roger's miserable. And Pete said, "Look at Roger." And that's when Don says, "Roger's miserable. I didn't think you were. And Pete was like, oh, am I miserable? You know, that stuck with Pete, I think, a little bit. He went home, he looked at his wife, and he just went right into the shower. And the next day, there's going to be a partners meeting. And all of a sudden, Lane's leaving, and he gets a frantic call from his wife. And then he storms in to the partners meeting, and he goes, Mrs. Harris, please leave immediately. And he starts yelling that his wife just called frantically, that the British guy that they took out, his wife called Lane's wife in tears. Their life is over, and they're not going to be getting their business. Because why? Because they found chewing gum on this guy's pubics. That's what he said. I think he said pubics. And so the prostitute left gum in the dude's hair, I suppose. Was she chewing gum when they were talking? That would have been hilarious looking back and seeing that. And Pete, Roger, and Don just started laughing. Like they didn't even care. Like, I mean, you lose business, great, but they just found it too funny to not laugh. And Lane's like, "This is not a laughing matter." And he's like, "You should have let me do it your way. Why did you want that?" And Pete's like, he wanted to do these things. He thought you were a homo. That's literally the words he said. And Lane's like, "Enough of this. I'm not going to take this insults from you anymore." Or he's like, "We didn't even need you. He goes, we didn't need you the moment you fired us." And Bert's like, "Mr. Campbell, that's uncalled for." Because Pete was basically saying, "You're not necessary around here, Lane. We didn't even need you." And Lane was like, "Screw this." And he goes, he basically says, "You're gonna answer for what you said." Fisticuffs. Once my fists go up, it's gonna be too late. He takes off his coat. Pete's like, "What? You kidding me?" And then they take off their sports coat, and they get into an old like fashion fisticuff brawl. You got Peggy and Joan listening in, and Pete gets a couple shots in, but Lane kicks his ass. You know, that's just the way it is. And Pete was embarrassed. He was bloodied up a little bit, bruised up a little bit, and he was. You could see that he was just ashamed at what happened. And after the fight, you know, Lane is in his office, and Joan comes in, gives him some ice to put her hand in. And he's like, "What do I even do around here? Am I necessary?" I like how British people say necessary. I don't even know if he says necessary, but I like it. And Joan's like, "What you do is very important." He's like, "You could do it." And, you know, and she goes, "No, you do it, whatever." They look at each other's eyes, and then he kisses Joan. Like, what the hell, Lane? You have your wife at home. You had your girlfriend from the Playboy Club. Now you don't know what you want in your life either. Yeah. Oh, did I use that? That's so local, that term. But oh my God, like, what are you doing, Lane? And Joan just got up and opened the door, almost like, "We're not doing this." He's like, once again, I completely embarrassed myself. I'm very sorry." She said, "For what?" "For what I did." He goes, "Oh, punching Pete Campbell? Everyone wanted to do that." And that's when Peggy talked to Ken and said, "Did you hear about the fight?" He goes, "Good. I would do that too." That's when he says he thinks that he told Roger, but I'm not so sure about that. So really, I feel like that's the end of Lane's story. But Lane's starting to wonder, you know, what is his worth to the department? Do they even look at him like he's important? He has a partner, though. And Pete, you know, he's got this wife, he's got this kid at home. What Don said, to me, should have resonated. It's lunchtime, and Pete is getting into the elevator, he's leaving. I think he's leaving for the day. And Don's getting in the elevator to go meet Megan for lunch, and he holds the door for Pete, and he just looks at him, and it's like, you know, it's not a big deal or whatever. And Pete, oh my God, I wish I remembered exactly what he said. There was like a little bit of conversation, but Pete just broke down and says, "I have nothing," and he started crying. And I think Don was like, "Okay, I don't want to be here." But then it shows Pete back later at the driver's ed course. And that's when he sees the girl with the boy, and he realizes that he gets his ass kicked at work. He says, then he was like, who fights at work? It's supposed to be an office. And he's right. You weren't supposed to, what were you doing? He was, what were we supposed to stop you to? We'll get in the middle of it? And that's when he's like, I have nothing. Which is bullshit, because he's got a beautiful wife. He's got a baby girl. And, he is a friggin' sociopath asshole. And he deserves nothing. He has everything. Pete Campbell has everything. He has a job. He's got influence and power at his job. He's got a lovely wife and a family, and he doesn't see that. He thinks he has nothing, when really that's, to me, what I think he deserves. He's not one of these people who is a good person but still doesn't see how good he has it. He is a shit person, and he thinks that or he's always trying to have more, have better. Look how giant and cool my look at my stereo. And even just the way he talks, like, he's just so see-through. And then you see him cry in the elevator, and it's hard to feel bad for him. It really is. I feel like that's the end of the episode, because then it ends with Ken talking about the man with the miniature orchestra, and it shows Pete sitting there in the driver's ed course while the girl is getting, fondled by the boy, the girl that he wanted to take out, even though he's got a wife at home. And this is a young girl. And you also hear the sound of the dripping of the faucet. Maybe it started dripping again. I don't know. Or if that was just there as a kind of like a mental thing. But that's how the episode ended. I think this was actually a really great character episode. Wow, I've talked for over 40 minutes now. It's crazy. So Pete, banging prostitutes, thinking he's got the beautiful, knowing he has the beautiful family, but not appreciating it. He's got this wonderful house in the suburbs, and now he needs to learn to drive. Oh, a driver's ed. There's a girl. I really want to be with her. I don't know what he would have done if it was just the fantasy of just wanting to feel young. But once he saw her with a really young person, that's when he realizes he's not young. And, a prostitute, I guess, will help. And it's funny. He yelled at Don saying, you judge me for doing my job. Like, this is your job, to take clients out and to also sleep with prostitutes, because that's part of your job. Bull. I call bull on that. Roger just had some little moments in this episode, but it was great direction. Great episode. Same thing with Don. Don did not partake in prostitution because he's happy now, and he doesn't want to screw up what he's already screwed up. So I think that was really good. And Lane just, made a friend, made a client possibly, and it all got swooped out, taken out from under him. The rug was pulled out from under him, and he was so pissed that he beat the shit out of Pete. And Pete says, "You're basically not even needed here," and I think that resonated. That got to him a little bit too. Like, am I really not needed here? And Ben Cosgrove, the writer, the man, really one of my more likable, one of my favorite characters. I'm glad that he was brought into the fold back in. It's weird because we still don't know what Kinsey is. I haven't seen him in years. But he might be doing something with his writing, and then the rug got pulled out from under him. That's my saying of the day. He thinks it was Pete. I'm not so sure about that. I still kind of think it might have been Peggy, because she'll do something underhanded if she feels like it's for the greater good, her good. But that's not going to stop Ben. That's not going to stop Ken. It is going to stop Ben because he got rid of that name and has a new nom de plume. I don't remember what it was. Was it like Michael something or other? I forget. But Ken will continue writing because that's what writers do. Writers write. If you want to write, you write. I've always wanted to be a writer, but if you don't write, you can't call yourself a writer. And Ken is a writer because he can't stop writing. And he was writing something almost like inspired by Pete, the man with a tiny little orchestra. My friends, I think that's it. I think we've covered it. It is getting late on a Friday night, and I want to get this up for you. I want to get this up for you because I respect you, the audience. I appreciate you. And I thank you as you come along on me. Whoa, that didn't sound right. Little side note. Today's August 16th, 2019. I don't know when you're going to listen to this. I don't know what year it is. I don't know if it's in the future. I don't know if you're even listening to this on a phone. Maybe this got implanted in a chip in your brain. And if so, I don't know if I could give you a headache. That was really stupid. The reason I bring this up is that August 16th is my dad's birthday. And it's also my mom and dad's anniversary. And it's also my mom's brother's birthday. Yes, my uncle, who happens to be my godfather. So not one of them are listening. And they never will. But I just want to say happy birthday to my uncle, happy birthday to my dad, and happy anniversary to my parents. It's a big day in my life. In their life, I guess, but it's also in my life. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. But that has nothing to do with Mad Men. No. Mad Men. I love this show. Sometimes I'm like, oh man, I just want to watch another episode right away. But then I'm like, I need to talk about this episode. It does help me. It helps me digest it. It helps me remember the characters and get into the stories more. This started off as an excuse to force myself to watch Mad Men. And it really isn't a job or forcing myself. It is a joy to watch this show. It is so good. And the extra is just I get to talk about it. Or I choose to talk about it. I don't get to talk about it. It's not like I got some great deal. I choose to talk about it. I get to do it on this podcast. And I get to have people like you listen to it. And the fact that you're still listening this late into this episode, this late into this series, is awesome. I'm going to continue doing it all the way into the end. And I hope you stay along for the ride. This journey that I'm taking into the stars. That doesn't make any sense. But let's just say that I'm taking this journey into the suburbs of cable television. Look, I feel like I'm going to cough by doing that voice. So my analogy of suburbs, I was trying to bring in the episode with Pete Campbell, makes no sense. So I'm just going to say thank you for coming along on this journey with me as I strive oh my God, to become a made man.
Fans not experts.